This is Jim Bish with the Americans in Wartime Museum. Today's date is March 29th, 2019, and I'm conducting an interview with Vivian Wood in Sun City, Arizona. Vivian, could you please give me your full name and where you were born?
My full name is Vivian Irene Wood, and I was born in Kenton, Ohio.
Okay, well, thank you. Were you raised in Kenton, Ohio, then? Is that where you grew up?
I grew up in Kenton, and then my father moved to a farm. He wanted to take up farming, and so we moved to a small farm which he rented.
Okay. Was that near Kenton or somewhere else?
It was close to Kenton.
Okay. Did you graduate from there then, from high school?
No, I went to Kenton for 2 years, and then I went to, my father moved to a farm close to Bell Center, Ohio.
Okay.
And I finished high school at Bell Center.
Okay. And what year was that you graduated from high school?
1939.
So after you graduated from high school, where did you do or what did you go? Did you stay there on the farm?
Yeah, I worked at the school news. I mean, while I was in high school, I worked on the school newspaper, and when I graduated, the local paper asked me to work for them
Okay.
So I worked for them for a couple of years.
Okay. And then after a couple years of working for them, on December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor occurred.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember Pearl Harbor, hearing about that news?
Yeah, I remember it very clearly.
You probably wrote or had stories in the newspaper about it.
Yeah, yes.
What do you remember about it?
I don't remember too much about it, but I definitely remember it. But and after Pearl Harbor, a lot of the boys enlisted, so we had stories in the newspaper about the guys going off to serve in the service. A lot of them, young men that I knew, went to the service.
Yeah. And how did you find your way into the service? How did you find your way into the military?
Well, I wanted to get away. I didn't feel like I was a small town girl. I wanted to get out and see the world. And so I went with one of my friends who was joining the WACs. But there was a Marine recruiter there, and he says, "Don't join the WACs, wait and join the Marines." He said, "You'll like their uniform a lot better. The green will be good for your red hair."
So you had bright red hair at the time.
Yeah.
And you listened to his advice?
I must have listened to it because I waited, and a few years later, I joined the Marine Corps.
When did you join the Marine Corps? Do you remember?
It was in 1943.
Okay.
See, I wasn't old enough at first to join. You had to be 20 in order to join, and you had to get your parents' permission. So I had to talk my dad into letting me sign up.
Yeah.
So I think it was August before they called me in. After I joined, I think I joined in June, and then they called me up in August.
Where did they send you? Where did you first go?
Well, they sent me to Camp Lejeune.
Okay.
And I can remember that trip I had. I went by train from Ohio. I went to a train to Cincinnati, and then I went on a train to Washington, D.C.
And
then Well, someplace I joined up with other girls that were going in too.
Uh-huh.
And we all went to, well, I remember we all went to Washington, D.C. We did some sightseeing while we were in Washington.
Okay, well, that was good.
Yeah.
And then what was Camp Lejeune like?
Well, as we went in, they kept saying, "You'll be sorry, you'll be sorry." They kept yelling for the...
Yeah.
There was some golfer that joined up about the same time I did, and people thought I was the golfer.
Really?
But I wasn't.
Yeah. Yeah. So how long were you at Camp Lejeune with basic training?
About, I know it was 4 weeks or 6. I think it was only 4 weeks because they were hurrying us through.
Uh-huh.
And then after 4 weeks, they put me on a troop train to, we're going to California.
Wow, you went a long ways away.
Yeah, and we went across country. They left some of the other ones off earlier. Different places they left people off, and then we finally got to California.
Uh-huh.
It was several days, several weeks later, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where did you end up at in California? Do you remember?
Well, it was San Diego, but it was there's a little suburb. I can't remember its name now. It looked like it was kind of a deserted, dry place.
Uh-huh.
But I thought it was, when they'd asked me where I wanted to go, I had read a brochure on California, and it sounded pretty good, so I said California. And they don't usually send you where you want to go, but
Right.
I think they made a mistake and sent me right to California.
So you ended up in a small town there by San Diego. What did they have you doing?
Well, it was a camp where men had been.
Is it Camp Pendleton?
No, it was Camp Elliott.
Okay, Camp Elliott, okay.
Yeah. They later made it into a prisoner's camp or something. I don't know, but Camp Elliott was where we were for several months.
What were you doing at Camp Elliott?
Well, I think they had me be the mail orderly.
Okay.
I took charge of the mail.
So when you were mail orderly, were you just sorting mail and delivering that type of things?
Yeah, and I would have a mail call, and I would read the names and call it out, and they'd say here, and you get the letters.
Yeah. After you were there for a while, were you doing anything else, or did they send you somewhere else?
I can't remember exactly how long I was Camp Elliott, but for quite a few months. Because, and I took it, that was all that time I was taking care of the mail. There was a lot of trouble about the mail during that time because there was a lot of movement of people in and out of the camp, and we had a hard time keeping track of who was getting mail and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm sure of that. A lot of people moving quickly around, hard to keep track of them.
Yeah. But I can remember how important mail was to people. Some people didn't get very much mail, and you felt sorry for them. When I call out other people's name and they didn't get any, they'd feel. Some of them almost cried.
Yeah, kind of depressing if you didn't get mail.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you were sorting mail and calling out for quite a few months there then.
Yeah, I think I did that until I went up to Camp Pendleton.
Okay.
I don't remember how many months I was at Camp Elliott, but then finally they opened up Camp Pendleton. That was a big ranch, and the Marines took it over.
Okay.
And when they opened it up, I was sent up there with some other women.
So you were at Camp Pendleton right when they opened it, pretty closely after they opened it up.
Yeah,
So it's a pretty big camp today.
yeah, I know.
So what was your job there? Did your job change when you got to Camp Pendleton?
Yeah, I was with the women's battalion, and I was I worked with the classification officer for assigning women to jobs.
Okay.
And I ran I did the daily news sheet. I think all Marine outfits have a sheet that tells every day who's on leave and who's sick and sick bay and all that. And it was called the daily news sheet, I think.
Yeah.
And I did that.
Now that fit in a little bit more with what you learned in your newspaper office, it sounds like.
Yeah, I did a lot of typing and I guess we had a mimeograph machine or something, which we printed the sheet every day.
Yeah. So how did you get your news? Did different people call in or let you know what was going on for each day, and then you compiled all that together?
I can't quite remember how we knew all this stuff. Must have been some, because I always knew who was sick and who was who was on leave and all that.
Who was your officer that you were working under? Do you remember?
I think it was Lieutenant Logan.
Lieutenant Logan?
Yeah. She was a little red-headed woman, I remember.
And how long were you at Pendleton?
I was there. I think I was there to the rest of the war.
Rest of the war? How do you feel that you were treated being a female in the Marine Corps?
Yeah, I was always treated pretty well. Yeah. Well, we were kind of protected because we were in the women's battalion, and the other women that weren't working in the battalion were sent out to the different men's outfits were out in the hills, and one of them would call and say, "We need a truck driver," or "We need a Jeep driver," or "We need a clerk to type for us," and we'd so in the morning there'd be some kind of transportation would take them out to these different jobs. Yeah.
And women would do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you primarily were stayed back in the offices, right? Doing your newsletter, your daily.
Yeah.
So you must have been a pretty good typist.
Yeah. I knew how to type because I learned it in high school.
So did you work in the same building then while you were in Camp Pendleton your entire time?
Yeah. I think so.
Yeah. When did you said you were there throughout the rest of the war, probably at Camp Pendleton?
Yeah.
Do you remember the war ending and knowing that you would your service would come to an end?
Yeah. We're kind of looking forward to that. But this time there was, the war ended in 45, and I went to Camp Pendleton in I don't know, it was 43 or 44.
Mm-hmm.
It was probably early in 44 when I went to Camp Pendleton.
Yeah, because you were at Camp Elliott for a little while in
Yeah.
43, yeah. So you were at Camp Pendleton through early 44. So most of 44 and 45 you were at Camp Pendleton.
Yeah.
Did you keep hearing good news that the war was probably winding down by 1945 in May?
You know, well, early on, we were losing the war.
Yeah.
And we wondered whether we'd ever get out.
Yeah.
We always talked about those civilian women. I can't remember too much about those years. We did some hiking in the hills, I know that. Camp Pendleton is a big place, but there are a lot of mountains and stuff where you can hike. And we did a lot of hiking. And some place there was a place where we could go horseback riding. I don't remember where that was, but someplace we went horseback riding.
And did you usually go out with women then from the camp?
Yeah. Some of the women that worked in the battalion, the sergeant major had a car, and she would sometimes take us on weekends to there was a little town around there. I can't remember where it was, but they had a place where we could stay for the weekend. We did things like that to get away from the camp for a little while.
Did you have to wear your uniform most of the time?
Yeah, I think you were supposed to always wear your uniform.
Uh-huh.
I don't remember being out of uniform much.
Yeah.
But we could wear our dungarees or something like that. We were around in the barracks.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think you were supposed to go outside the barracks.
Yeah.
Unless you were in uniform.
Mm-hmm. How did you like the uniforms?
Well, I guess I liked it pretty well because I never minded wearing it. They had winter uniforms were the wool ones, but in the summer we had seersucker, short sleeves seersucker uniforms.
And they were much cooler.
Yeah.
Probably much easier to work in.
Yeah, but we always wanted to wash them and starch them and make them look nice.
And I'm sure you did look nice in them. So when the war ended, were you did you stay there much longer after the war ended, or did they did you leave fairly quickly? Do you remember how you were left there?
When the war ended, somebody wanted we were in California, you see, and somebody wanted a car taken to Washington, D.C. So some of us volunteered to take the car, drive the car across country to Washington, D.C. And that's all we did. I can't remember how we hooked up with them when we got to Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
But it was winter time when we went across there. I remember getting stuck in the snow, and I don't know, it was West Virginia or someplace going into Washington, D.C. There's a lot of snow. But we got the car to Washington, D.C. And when we got there, we each one of us went to, I took a train to my home in Ohio. I remember that.
So you went from Pendleton and drove a car. How many of you, was there 4 or 5 of you in the car?
Yeah, I think about 4 of us.
And you traveled all the way across country in the automobile, going back to Washington, D.C.
That's right.
Wow, that must have been a journey.
Once, as I told you, once we got stuck in the snow and went in the ditch, somebody came along and pulled us out of the ditch.
Yeah.
And there was a neighbor there who took us in and gave us a bed for the night. Then the next day, I don't remember how we got into Washington, D.C., but we got there.
Yeah. So after you were in Washington, D.C., were you discharged then, or were you still in a little bit longer after that?
I was discharged when I left California, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you decided you were just taking the car back and then...
Yeah, then go home.
So after you left D.C. then, you took a train back to
Ohio.
Ohio? Where your family was?
Yeah.
And so your service was done, then that was after the war was over with?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. As soon as the war was over, I think they wanted to get rid of the women as fast as they could.
Yeah.
And they discharged. I think I was discharged in December, and the war ended in December, so I was discharged a few days later, I think.
Getting back to your war experience, did you feel you had a very good war experience working in as part of being in the Marine Corps?
Yes, I enjoyed it. I didn't feel like I was doing much. We weren't aware of the war so much, although I can remember the headlines when Roosevelt died.
Did you do anything special? Did the camp do anything special for his funeral or after hearing about his death?
I can't remember us doing much, but I remember that the day he died, and I remember that we talked about that.
Do you remember what did you do anything special when the European War ended in May of '45?
I think we were. I think they were worried that there'd be some kind of. I don't know what, but they confined us to camp. We couldn't leave the base that day. And I can't remember. We were glad that part of the war was over, though.
Yeah.
But when the main war, when the Japanese surrendered, there was a big parade in Los Angeles, and all the different people from the different camps around participated in a big parade in Los Angeles.
Did you go to that?
Yes, I was part of that.
You were in the parade then?
Yeah.
And were all the women together marching?
Yeah. And there were men, there were soldiers and Navy. Everybody was participating in the parade.
What rank did you hold while you were in the Marine Corps? Do you remember?
My highest rank was sergeant.
Sergeant? And that's what you was discharged as a sergeant?
Yes. That's right.
Did the work that you did in the Marine Corps, did that help you later on with any of your experiences later on in life?
Well, I became a pretty good typist because I was doing that daily news sheet, and so I used. Well, I think one of the first things I did was take a secretarial course, and learn a little more about shorthand and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I worked as a secretary. I went to Philadelphia because I wanted to get away from the small town when I went. And one of my friends from the Marine Corps lived in Philadelphia. She says, "Why don't you come to Philadelphia?" So I did, and there were quite a few the Marines that I knew from the war in Philadelphia, and we had a little group that met regularly, and we got to be friends.
Yeah. So you got a job in Philadelphia and stayed there for a while?
Yeah, and I worked for the Farm Journal, and I was always interested in writing and stuff like that. And at the Farm Journal, I worked as a secretary, but I worked for this man who was helpful to me, and he got me to do a little writing. And I finally got an article published in the Farm Journal, and I can't remember how I left. Oh, I knew about the GI Bill, and so I applied for entrance to the University of Chicago because one of my friends had gone there, and she was. This was a time when they had. I don't know, remember his name, but you were able to take exams and pass out of things. And I'd had quite a bit of experience by then, and so I was able to go a little more advanced than I would have. I didn't have to take a lot of the beginning courses.
So did you graduate from the University of Chicago then?
Yes, I got my BA, and then I went on and got a master's, and I finally got a PhD.
Wow.
All three.
That's good. At the University of Chicago, or did you go to other places?
I got three degrees from the University
At Chicago, okay. Where did you do after you left, after you got your master's and doctorate?
Well, after I got my master's, I was kind of tired of going to school, and I took a job someplace, and I didn't get my doctorate until later. When I got, I think I was sort of tired to go to school for so long. So I waited a few years, and then I went back and got my doctorate.
I'm assuming you were no longer a secretary?
No. After I got my doctorate, I took a job at University of Wisconsin, where I taught for. In fact, I taught for 27 years there at Wisconsin.
What did you teach?
I taught mostly about aging. While I was still a student, they were anxious to get people to learn about aging, and because they saw this big mass of older people coming on, retired people, and they were trying to get people trained to take care of all this. And they gave me a scholarship that they were pretty good scholarships that they gave them. And I got one, and that took me through. The GI ran out, and then this scholarship took over. Took me through till I got my doctorate.
So your Marine experience helped you quite a bit down in life then, for as far as getting you out and getting you into California and seeing the world.
And well, I've always been very thankful for the GI Bill.
And the GI Bill, yes.
That's great.
If there was, do you have grandchildren, great-grandchildren?
No, I never married.
Never married?
No.
If somebody that's much younger sees this video, what advice would you have to them if they're wondering about going into into one of the military branches?
Well, I think there's great opportunities in the military branches. One of my friends, her son went into the Navy because he can get medical training. He wants to be a neurologist or something like that. And you can get a lot of training in the military these days. I think it's great opportunities for young people. I didn't, at the time I went in, I wasn't thinking of opportunities, but it turned out to be.
Yeah.
It gave me a lot of.
Yeah. Is there anything we haven't talked about that you'd like to mention before we end the interview?
No, I think you covered a lot of ground.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you, Vivian. Thank you for your service, and thank you for all that you do, and thank you for your working at the university.
Thank you.
Thank you.